I'm talking today to Cristina, a senior forensic investigator at Crypto Legal, and she will share with us some of the insights around the absolutely massive and growing industry of crypto scams. Cristina, very, very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for having me.
One of the things I was reading a few weeks ago as I was preparing for this is that crypto scams have now become a massive part of the economy of certain countries. There's places in Southeast Asia where hundreds of people are victims of human trafficking. They're forced to participate in these crypto scams. It has become a huge, elaborate, almost professionalized industrial complex of people who are out there targeting people all over the world to scam them and take money from them, which I just think is, it's a crazy thing that this has become such a professionalized industry. And of course, there's, relatively little resources and relatively few people fighting this, but you're one of them. Tell me a little bit more about who you are, what your story is, and what it is that you do.
Yes, so everything that you put out in the intro, unfortunately, is true. And this is one of the aspects that we target on our company with Crypto Legal. So the company started about 9 years ago, has gone through some new ownership, restructuring, but what we did, or one of the first companies, was handling cryptocurrency forensics and the legal side of things within cryptocurrency in one company. So the company itself, we handle a lot of different types of aspects within cryptocurrency, but unfortunately, the biggest aspect of it, or people reaching out to us, is in terms of fraud and different types of fraud.
So what does your average client look like? What happened to them? Why are they reaching out? How can you help them?
Sure. So about maybe we get 100 requests a week from different people around the world. So only in fraud, and that is only to us. So you can imagine the larger scale of things. They are usually typical company owners or workers. They are highly educated, successful in their businesses, but somehow in some way they have been a part of some type of fraud. And we are going to speak more in detail about some of these, just for people to have a bit more awareness and see the red flags before they invest their funds anywhere. But yes, they can be from all over the globe. So we have from Africa, Europe, Asia, a lot of Americans. And the funds that they invest is obviously significantly different. But for them, it's their life savings. And unfortunately, when they come to us, usually it means that they are losing their house, or they have remortgaged it and they are financially in debt. They have taken out loans that they're not able to repay. So unfortunately, when they reach us, it's already quite a dire situation. And why I think this conversation is very important, that we try to speak about these different types of aspects of fraud and how they operate, and how people can be aware and not to engage before they are in the situation where they need to reach out to us.
Like, I'm curious, like, what can you do? Like, if I invested a good chunk of money into what turns out to be a scam and it's been converted into crypto, that money is gone, no? Like, that's somewhere in some Russian exchange or in Cambodia, or, like, someone has that money. It's very, very hard for me to see it again. What can you offer to someone that has gone through this?
Sure. So yes, when clients come and reach out to us, first the thing is that sometimes they are not even aware of what happened. So their scenario or situation of what they think happened is not actually what happened. So first of all, is understanding the full scope of things, where their funds are located, what can be done, what options are available. Unfortunately, like I mentioned to you before, we have clients from different countries. So for them, it can be their life savings. But in terms of when we're talking about the cost for forensic and legal services, the tools that we need to use that have a cost involved, the fund that they have, or the amount that they have lost, is quite small, unfortunately, in bigger scope of things for law enforcement, for private companies, for any type of litigation action. So in some situation, there's nothing that can be done because the amount that was lost is quite small. But obviously for the victim, it's a very big amount of funds. So in some scenarios, unfortunately, there's nothing that can be done, and why prevention or awareness is very important, to make sure that the people are not sending funds to a place that they are not aware of, or that hasn't been verified. or has some type of red flag that we have reviewed. In other cases, the client might have a lot of information about what happened, where the funds have been sent to. So if we're talking about cryptocurrency, so the transactions, the wallet addresses, but we also see not only cryptocurrency, but also bank wire transfers being sent from one country to another. So we have some type of company information, bank details. So there can be more investigative aspects involved in that. Sometimes we're able to pinpoint where the person is located, who they are, where they are logging in to their exchange, where their address. So it will really depend on the specifics of each case, what type of information is available, how the funds have been sent, how long of a time has gone by, because obviously the more time has gone by, the more aspects of how the funds have been moved can occur. And obviously a little bit of what type of information the victim has of the situation that has occurred. So there can be scenarios where we're not able to do anything. Then can be scenarios where we are able to look at the flow of funds within cryptocurrency and understand where those funds were sent to. So an exchange, to communicate with that exchange. Sometimes what we're able to do is to take down the website or the application or where that victim was logging in. So basically prevention for other victims to be targeted by the same organization. Sometimes we're able to pinpoint and locate where the operation is occurring. So we'll talk maybe a bit more about KYC. If we request information from the exchange of who is that account holder, where are they operating, what type of information they have provided to verify themselves. So you mentioned Southeast Asia. So yes, a lot of those operations are coming out from that area. Unfortunately, these wallet addresses might not be registered by the individuals who run the scam, but by yes, exactly targeted victims who have been promoted false job opportunities and have taken their passports away and then been doing KYC processes with their documentation to create accounts where they can launder money. So it's a very complicated structure, a lot of different aspects to it, and depending on the situation, different types of resolutions also for victims, sometimes not full recovery of funds, sometimes just locating or freezing the assets that the fraudsters are not able to withdraw them. Sometimes just blocking the websites or the applications, awareness for other victims. So it can come in multiple different aspects of what we might be able to help with.
Can you give me some examples of like the absolutely best case scenario of, I appreciate these are complicated and they vary a lot and sometimes you can do something and sometimes not so much, but can you give me some examples of like an absolutely best case scenario of what you're able to do for clients?
So when our company, what we're focusing more is on recovery of assets. Obviously, as I mentioned to you, within the frame of how these operations work, we are also interested in providing the information of how the operation is run or who is running it to the law enforcement in the jurisdiction of where they are located or how they're operating. So those are criminal matters, and we do provide all of that information to law enforcement, but we let them handle criminal cases against these individuals that we're able to identify. What we focus on is recovery of funds. So the best scenario and the fastest way for us to recover funds is being able to identify who is the person behind that screen or the communication of the profile, who they're pretending to be behind that exchange or wallet address, and basically asking them to return those funds. So some scenarios we are able to communicate with the fraudsters and basically have them send those funds back to their victim. That is the fastest process and the easiest way for us to recover funds. Because one thing I think is important to mention is that with bank transfers, if something goes wrong, if you are being charged double, you can always go to the bank and ask them like, hey, I was charged incorrectly or I didn't receive this product, so I would like to request a chargeback or a resolution of this case. So unfortunately with cryptocurrency, there are not these scenarios available. So cryptocurrency transactions are irreversible. So that means that you can't go to the exchange and request them for those funds back once you are aware that a fraud occurred or that you send funds to that you thought was a legitimate exchange but turned out to be a fraudulent exchange. So that's why fraud is going over into cryptocurrency, because it's more difficult to be able to get those funds back.
So the asset recovery is the absolute dream, of course, for these victims, but it's a super, super tricky thing because As you mentioned, the whole point of cryptocurrency transactions is that, they're uncensorable. So in theory, it's lost. But by the sounds of it, what happens is often they will end up in exchanges or other places where you can actually reach out to a partner and say, hey, that money is not legitimate, and the exchange will take over it and send it back to the victim, basically.
Correct. So when we are talking about forensic investigation within cryptocurrency, so yes, blockchain investigations or tracing what is part of any type of fraud case is understanding the initial transactions that were sent from the victim to the fraudsters and then looking at blockchain data. So basically movement of funds from one wallet address to the next to understand where are the fraudsters trying to convert these funds into fiat. It's basically, obviously, the point is at some point they will want to withdraw those funds to use them for some type of purpose. So what we do in terms of tracing is looking at the movement of funds, because that's something that is available to do. And is a process of fraud recovery is looking at the transactions, showing the movement of transactions from the victim's wallet address to the fraudster's wallet address. And then exactly once it reaches an exchange, request that exchange to freeze those assets.
Let's talk a little bit about the different types of scams that exist, because I think people don't fully understand the full variety of these. I mean, these are professional organizations running very well-oiled corporate machine. What types of different scams exist?
So I think it's important that we go over, yes, a few of these, because I think one of the things that I would like to point out before is that when victims come to us, or sometimes why they don't report things, is because they feel stupid or they feel that they did the wrong decision, that they usually don't do these types of aspects and funds, is because exactly they are organized groups. It's not an individual on the other side. These are massive organizations. They are very aware of what they're doing, how they're operating. When we have seen raids of some of these compounds, they have scripts of how to communicate with people. And one of the first scams that we're going to talk about probably is the most well-known, but also there's a lot of different types of layers in there. And red flags that we can look out for is the big butchering or romance scams. I think probably it's the most well-known, but it's also important to understand that they are not always romantic. Sometimes it's just about having somebody to communicate with, a friendship. We call them more, I would say, of like companionship frauds, because yes, they're not always usually romantic in nature. Once they reach out to you, you receive a reply, they start looking at your social media. What are your interests? Where do you work? Do you have kids? What do they do? What type of, community college you went to? So they look for so much information about you to create that perfect profile of the person to talk to on the other end. They will like the same things that you like. They will have the same hobbies. They will have the same interests. They will ask about the things that you were doing XYZ. So they are very, very aware of how they're targeting their victims and how much information they're gathering on them to make that perfect profile for you to talk to. Then exactly. So it will be over time. It will happen little by little, all of this communication. And at some point they will talk about investing. That will start the process of going to an exchange. Sometimes they start off with legitimate exchanges for you to gain confidence, for you to understand how transactions work. And then at some point they will go over to a fake exchange, investment platform, direct transactions to some random person, bank transfers. We see a lot direct wire transfers. And this type of grooming process, if the victim is unaware of who they're communicating with, can go on for years and years and years. So unfortunately, we see very long periods of time where the victim and the fraudster have been communicating. Unfortunately, it's kind of like
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've seen a lot. Not necessarily the companionship side of things, but just in general amongst older people. Like, they receive a phone call, it's someone impersonating their bank, it's someone pretending to be someone that they're not. And for an older person managing computers, different accounts and passwords, etc., these are all very complicated things. They don't necessarily understand what's going on. And then next thing you know, oh, I've lost money from my bank account. What happened? And there's so much of it. Like, there's so many people I know personally who have been impacted for different amounts, ranging from, small amount to potentially life-changing amounts. And it's crazy that this has been This is a very, very fast growing industry, and there's so many different of these types, right? You mentioned the companionship side, there's the impersonation. Like, how would you classify these, right? There's the pretending to be in a fake exchange. Like, how would you classify these? Like, what different types are there?
So yes, that's why there's larger groups of fraud, and then there's subgroups, and some of them are mixed one with the other because, as we said, they are organized groups, so they're becoming more vigilant of how they use different types of programs, AI, coding. So we can see, yes, for example, with older people as well, obviously they are not aware of how these types of transactions work. Sometimes they give access to their computer or their phone directly to the fraudster. Just always easier if you just directly make some transfers for my behalf because I don't understand what's going on. So we can classify more or less of these, yes, basically like romance scams or companionship or community based. Then another group I would say is more of like impersonations and AI, because also dealing with this romance or companionships, we see a subgroup where is, oh, I was able to make a video conversation with this person that I'm talking to, so it must be that they are real. So we see some deep fakes, because when we are comparing basically screenshots of from the phone call with the photos, we see that they're not similar. We have seen some situations where Chinese models have been paid to be on video calls. They don't actually understand what's going on. They have just been paid to be there, just say a few words and then say, oh, I don't speak any English, and then the call cuts off. So there's a lot of different types of layers, how they're pretending to be that they're legitimate, how the person on the other side is real. One subgroup that we're going to talk about maybe is more of like the investment platforms or rug pools, is that we see deepfakes now as well of influential people or financial gurus on social media claiming that there's some new type of initial coin offering coming out.
Yes, I've seen those. They're everywhere. All of these things are everywhere. You see them everywhere.
So yes, so the person who is investing money on that platform thinks that this is done by a financial guru, somebody very important in the industry, or somebody very famous. And unfortunately, yes, these deepfake ads are going on for a long period of time before any social media platform actually understands that they are on the platform, that they're able to take them off. And by that time, obviously, there's large investments already being made on this initial coin offering. And then usually what happens is that when the coin is launched, it's zero value. Something happened that they're not able to open their operation. They claim bankruptcy, or they just pull all of the funds out and disappear. So we have seen also fake tokens. So basically a copy of a token saying, for example, let's say it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or USDC. But when we look at the actual value on blockchain, we see that is zero value. So it's very easy. And one of the sub scenarios of fraud that we see is that it's very easy to create a token that looks like a legitimate token because you can use the same letters, same organizational letters, but the value of that token is zero. So sometimes we have clients claiming that they have, 5 Bitcoin in their wallet address. And then we look on blockchain, but the value is actually zero because
I have family who, I know.
So these are some of the things in terms of like the regulation or the operations of how, for example, let's say tokens are created. There should be limitations of not being able to use the same letter references or the same token or coin that already exists. I think that's one of the things that needs to be reviewed and regulated more, so that at least we're able to limit this type of fraud. Then I think some of the other ones that we were talking about exchanges is that we see copies of legitimate exchanges. So the same website or the same application, they look exactly the same like any legitimate exchange. So many of the big ones, the logo is the same, the text, the abbreviation. There's maybe just a little small difference in a letter, the URL, something that is not really significant for a normal person to look at to identify that is fraudulent. They use exactly the same logo exactly to gain confidence. You think that, for example, it's crypto.com. You download the application from your app store, obviously, because it is on the app store. You think that it's legitimate. It looks exactly like the same design as the application of the original exchange. And then you're sending funds to that wallet address that you created on the platform. But then when we start looking at the back end of that, or the coding or the little changes in the name or the URL, we can see that this is actually a duplicate of a legitimate exchange. So sometimes the frauds also become more sophisticated. And if you're really not due diligent enough to look at those little small details and differences, you're not able to really see maybe firsthand that you are sending funds to a fraudulent or a duplicate exchange trying to be a legitimate platform.
I wanted to know what tools you guys use to track these things, but before we go into that, I'd like to let you finish.
Sure. So I just want to maybe talk about two more other types of scenarios, or three, just to make sure that we're covering our bases. Another group, unfortunately, there are many different types of fraudulent activities of how they're operating. So another group I would say is professor scams. We call them in that manner. Yeah, so we have named them in this manner because usually it's a WhatsApp or Telegram group. There's probably like 100 people supposedly on there. There's a
I've been added to those as well.
So yes, we call them professor scams. So there's usually one professor or financial expert that is giving signals out to how to send funds to a platform, when to trade, how to operate. And there's usually an assistant who is giving daily information about, I don't know, how the trades went. There's a lot of people sending screenshots in the chat saying that they have made gains or they're able to withdraw. So usually how it happens is that probably within that 100 people in that group, only there is one victim and all the other 99 profiles are the same person or the same operation, basically trying to get that victim to believe that this is a legitimate investment platform, that the professor is real, the signals that they're giving or the information that they're giving on where to invest and how to invest are real, so that they will send more funds to the platform.
Got it. And actually, one more thing I wanted to discuss before we talk about tools is, do you see a very clear like before and after with AI? Like, has AI enabled more efficient scams, or is it just more of the same?
No, we can see that, yes, it has become more efficient, better operations, faster transactions. So we can, for example, if we're talking about tracing, we can see more automation as well. For example, in the early days, so when we started, it could be because they're becoming more organized. They also understand how tracing works. So how we on the other side, law enforcement or private companies, are tracing the funds. So they are also becoming more aware of how to try to hide those funds. Is that initially, many years ago, it was basically the victim was sending funds directly to the fraudster wallet address, and then they were withdrawing them to an exchange. So now we have seen some automatizations where the funds are going through 100 wallet addresses, 200 wallet addresses, just as automatizations to make it harder just to follow those transactions. For example, one of the things that I mentioned was about the deepfakes or the AI video calls. So yes, they're becoming more convincing, better quality. So you're not able to actually distinguish. There's no lagging. The quality is really good. So yes, those are the type of aspects that we also see that they're trying to use to obviously improve their operations.
And is it like also higher volumes, or has this been growing no matter what? Like I wonder if you like see an inflection point of like scams are growing at this rate, and then ChatGPT comes out and it just like grows even higher.
I think from what I wanted to have this conversation and why we're having this conversation is as well that one of the things that we want to do is create more awareness. So when we started, we were only being reached out by victims when they were already defrauded. But now I think that we're seeing more of due diligence, which is important. So from our side, from the work that we do, because we also have a fraud list on our website that has about 60,000. And this we have accumulated over the years where people have reached out to us about different types of companies, websites, applications, phone numbers, duplicate exchange, like fraudulent exchanges, is that we have seen the number of people being more due diligent about, is this platform correct? Is the person that I'm communicating with the person that they claim to be? Is this company safe? Is this exchange a partner of this legit, exactly a partner of this company that they're claiming to be? Is this regulated by the FCA? So yes, what we have seen is more of the due diligence side of clients being more aware. And hopefully after, we'll be able to grow that number even more.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So yeah, tell me a bit more about these efforts that you guys have made in terms of raising awareness, right? So, we're doing it right now. We're talking about this. This is a growing problem. What do you think people should know about these scams?
So yes, obviously there's a bit more information now out there. They are growing in numbers and they're growing in the matter of how they're operating. That's why I think the most important thing is awareness, because that's the only way that we are able to avoid the first point of contact is the initial transaction, or where they hook victims. Things to be aware of, exactly all of this. If somebody messages you on any type of social media platform, do not engage. One of the aspects that I want to talk about as well is that we see retargeting of victims, which is very important to understand that, yes, they are not only pretending to be exchanges or investment platforms, they're also pretending to be recovery companies, lawyers, banks, tax agencies, law enforcement. So the level of how they operate and who they pretend to be grows in such a big manner. Anybody has any information about you, knows where you have invested, knows where your funds are all of the same people who have already some type of information about you, means that they are the fraudsters. They're trying to, and one of the big aspects is that they're retargeting the same victims, which is some of the things that we need to talk about as well, to make sure that if you don't provide any information to a forensic investigator, to law enforcement, about your wallet address, where you invested funds, whatever transactions you made, we do not know where your funds are located. So that's also one of the important things to understand.
Yeah. So you're saying, sorry. So around this retargeting, like what you're saying is, if you get victimized in one of these scams, then you enter some sort of database for other people to scam you, or for the same person to like scam you again and again. They basically see you as a good customer and they keep coming back.
That is, yes, one of the scenarios that we see occurring over and over again. So sometimes when client or victims reach out to us, they have been scammed 3-4 times already. It is because they are being put on exactly a victims list, which is sold on the black market. So they're being basically shared between other scammers, being bought to retarget, or they are the same people retargeting you again, pretending to be another company. So that is one of the first why we're talking about so much about the awareness, is basically block anybody whose phone number you don't know. Don't answer anybody's social media texts. Verify, because we don't only see, when we're talking about the social media profiles, dating apps has become a really, really big pool of where these people are operating. But also they are pretending to be daughters, lost cousins, so family members, that they have friends of yours from high school. So they are really, really operating in such a matter, in such a detail, that you as an individual are probably not going to detect that this is fraud. So one of the things that we recommend, what I was mentioning before about due diligence and why we have seen the number of due diligence go up, is that we would just recommend to reach out to a professional, your local PI, a lawyer. I don't know if it's, for example, a contract that you're signing, or, for example, any type of forensic investigator, just to review if the information that they're sending is correct, who they're claiming to be, is this investment safe, because they will provide documentation of registered companies, or filings, or passports, or all types of, like, everything. Basically, they will provide everything for you to believe that they are legitimate. If it's not a trained eye, it's really, really difficult to understand if it is actually fraudulent or not, or if who they are claiming to be is who they are. And for us, as well as forensic investigators, we see new types of cases or scenarios that they're creating as well. And sometimes even for us, it takes a long time to understand, okay, they say that this is like this and this is like that, and we need to ask for additional information from the client, because sometimes the level of basically effort that they have put in for this to look legitimate is so good that even for us, it takes some time to understand if it's fraudulent or not.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, these are incredibly sophisticated players doing incredibly sophisticated professional work, and it comes at the expense of wider society. I mean, banks, financial institutions, individuals, like, they have to spend loads on mitigation, on prevention, on the costs for individuals of being scammed. Like there's people out there who are living a life that is much more frugal than it would have been if they hadn't been scammed by some of these individuals. I mean, this is such a huge cost to society. And as far as I can tell, there's very little that can be done on the level of society and law enforcement. A lot of the costs of mitigation fall on individual companies and individuals who need to be just constantly aware and prepared of these things.
So yes, at the moment, unfortunately, this is the scenario, and why on the jurisdictional side, or one on the different countries, for example, we are seeing regulations change, a lot of limitations being put into place. But that is also it's not only because they are trying to limit our freedom to use cryptocurrency, but because the fraud part of those transactions being made via those exchanges is so high that they need to put more regulations into place just to try to control a small part of what is happening within the fraud industry, unfortunately. So yes, we do see more KYC regulations or limitations in terms of withdrawals or proof of funds, because in our company as well, we advise exchanges or cryptocurrency service providers of the AML and KYC regulations, or then that they need to put into place, the tools that they can use, and the training that they need to do for their staff. So that is becoming more and more detailed, obviously, because of the aspects of how many volume of transactions are going through that are actually being calculated for fraud or being operated within these fraud parameters. And yes, so one of the big subjects I think also right now is the swap or token swaps to DeFi platforms. So how are those being reviewed or regulated, or what can be done so that those platforms are not being used to easily move those funds into another jurisdiction? Because obviously when we're talking about cryptocurrency, exactly, it's worldwide, it's international, so it cannot be only limited to where the victim is located. It has to be a wider collaboration internationally to understand that if the victim is in North America, the exchange is in the Bermuda Triangle that you mentioned before, but the fraudsters are actually located somewhere in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a tricky subject because on one hand, there is a tremendous amount of value that you unlock with the freedom to transact, right? Like stablecoins have become a huge industry. It's added a lot of value. I've spoken to freelancers who before used to lose a good chunk of their salary to transaction fees, who now get paid in stable coins, they spend in stable coins, they live off of them. And there's thousands of people like this for whom, the permissionless and self-custodial nature of these things is a huge advantage. On the other hand, you have a lot of people for whom, making a cryptocurrency transaction is effectively, the first time they do so, they're losing money, they're getting scammed. And again, this is not just a crypto problem. Like, most of the people I know who have been victims of fraud have been victims of, basically revealing a bank password or sending money somewhere via a fiat transaction. These things happen a lot. But nevertheless, the cryptocurrency aspect of it just makes it so much faster and more efficient. Same thing with AI, no? Like with AI is an immensely useful, efficient tool, but if used for bad, then all of a sudden you can impersonate someone's family member, someone's sister, someone's child, someone's grandmother, and then all of a sudden, you can take their money. How do you see this?
Unfortunately, it's not something that we see going away at this point, and that's why awareness is so important, because the best thing that we can do is to provide as much information as possible for people to not make that initial transaction. That is the best case scenario. And what we would recommend, as I mentioned to you before, is due diligence. I think, in my personal opinion, spending that $200-$300 to $1,000 to make a professional to review, for a professional to review if that company is legitimate, if that investment is legitimate, if that exchange it has the correct licenses, is worth the additional few $100,000 to millions of dollars that you're going to send further on. So it's just awareness of reviewing that information, not sending those transactions, making the due diligence process, I think is the only way that we're able to limit or to basically have a little bit less of fraud out there. I think is the only scenario in at this time where we're able to help
Hmm.
or to limit these actions, because obviously the process of how it is international, how those transactions are made, the blockchain transactions are not reversible. Like we mentioned before, the process of creating laws and regulations. So for example, that no random website can be online in 2 seconds without being verified, that you cannot add an exact duplicate of crypto.com to an Apple store, or just these aspects are going to take longer, or the regulations and all of the limits or the KYC procedures that need to go into these types of actions where these frauds are happening right now. So I think that the thing that we can focus right now is on awareness and making sure that people are not sending that initial cryptocurrency transaction if they don't know what it's for, how it's for, where are they sending it, if they don't know how it works. So yes, as you mentioned about these grandmas and grandpas. So what we see is that they are being dictated with screenshots, do this, do that, click on here, click on that, do this, now send here, so they are not aware of actually what they're doing or how they're operating or what type of transaction they're making. So that
Hmm.
is the thing that we're trying to limit at this point. And it's difficult because also what we need to understand is that, for example, if family members come to us, like children of the victim, is that maybe they have been talking to their groomer, let's say, or handler for 5 years. And we do a forensic investigation. We send over a report with all of our findings, but they have communicated with us maybe 5-10 minutes to provide us information for us to create the report, but they've been talking to their handler for 5 years. So it's very difficult for them to also believe what is happening.
Yeah, that's really tough.
So yeah, that is very tough because they are so well basically brainwashed already with all of the
Yeah.
information, with all of the documentation, with all of the details of that operation, and that it is a very complicated situation to be in, as well as a friend, as a child, as a partner. It is a very complicated matter and many different aspects and layers to it.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a difficult subject, and frankly, as you said, like, don't see how this is going to get better. I think we as a society basically need to develop better antibodies to just be able to recognize on an individual level what the nature of these scams are. I mean, it's one of the costs of, improvements in technology, like AI, like the internet itself, like cryptocurrency. I don't see how this will get better without individuals simply becoming more aware.
Unfortunately, this is just the kind of scenario that we're seeing, is that obviously when technology is getting better, all of these AI tools are getting better. They can focus more faster. They can, in terms of, for example, communication is one of the aspects that you asked me before in what of AI, is that several years ago we could see language. So for example, like how the way that they were writing. So for example, what country they might have been from, because it wasn't perfect native English. So now, because we have so many tools for language, that it can be perfect Spanish, perfect Portuguese, perfect English, perfect Chinese, so they can target specifically in their victims' language as well. So that is one of the aspects also that we have seen grown, because now we have like targeting in German, targeting for every language basically, because the tools are becoming so good that the translations are almost perfect native, so you can't even understand who is communicating on the other side, basically.
Right. Christina, thank you so much for your time so far. Is there something that we haven't touched up until now that you think we should discuss?
I think that this is a lot of different topics and a lot of information within those. So I think that we have covered basically just the different aspects of fraud that are out there and people to be aware, but there's always a lot more detail within that industry and what we can talk about. But I think for now, yes, just to go over to understand that there are very well operated organizations, that please make sure that you do your due diligence, you understand, and that if you are trying to invest in any type of business platform, cryptocurrency, stocks, just do your due diligence, hire an expert to review that information, that if you do decide to move forward, that at least that is a verified company or platform.
Got it. Okay, Cristina, thank you so much for your time. This has been a very insightful conversation. Where can people reach out to you or to your company if they want to talk, if they want to discuss things?
Sure. So if you would like to reach out to Crypto Legal, you can do so via our website. We have our, as we mentioned through this call, our fraud website list or awareness list, scam list that you can review if we have added companies before on that platform that somebody has reported to us. That is cryptolegal.uk. Or if you want to reach out specifically about your case or would like to have any information or do due diligence on a company that you'd like to invest in, it's info@cryptolegal.
Okay, thank you very much.